The father mistreats him cruelly in the presence of his mother, leaving a deep wound in the boy's soul. In the present, Mimori wakes up during a school trip they are taking by bus. He notices an argument between two classmates and wonders whether he should intervene. One of the boys demands the return of a book, and another boy steps in to defend his classmate. After an apology, the book is returned. Mimori starts reflecting on how his recent dream might have affected him, and decides to stand up for the girl who has become the center of the conflict. However, before he can act, the entire group of students is suddenly transported to another world and appears before a queen in a castle. At first, the students think it's a prank, but the queen explains that they will never return to their world. Their mission is to defeat the demon lord. The queen kneels and begs for their help, explaining that each of them harbors incredible power. To prove the seriousness of the situation, a massive monster devours a person right in front of the students, shocking them and confirming the reality of what is happening. Then, one by one, they approach a magical orb that reveals their abilities. One of the boys is so strong that he destroys the sacred stone, and the students realize that their group already has 3 S-rank individuals. When it's Mimori's turn, he is ignored as though he is insignificant. He checks his status and finds that his abilities are incredibly weak. The queen declares that Mimori has received the lowest rank and must be eliminated. He is offered a chance to prove his worth. If he can escape from the ruins, his power will be recognized. The queen claims that he is weak and has no chance of success. Soga, one of the students, tries to protect Mimori, but the queen distracts her. Filled with rage and despair, Mimori attempts to attack the queen, but his strike is easily deflected. In a moment of desperation, he recalls his painful childhood, and before he is sent to the ruins, he curses the goddess, wishing her death. Once in the ruins, Mimori discovers numerous corpses and encounters a gigantic monster. He uses his low-level paralysis spell, and to his surprise, it works on the mighty creature. Mimori realizes that even weak spells can be useful against powerful enemies. He combines paralysis with poison, and the monster begins to bleed. However, Mimori's mana runs out, and the Minotaur breaks free from paralysis. In a desperate attempt to survive, Mimori uses his skill again, preparing for the final showdown. Mimori faces a critical situation. His paralysis skill no longer works on the monsters because he cannot use the same spell twice in a row on the same creature. Despite this, Mimori notices the approach of many other monsters and is forced to continue the fight, barely standing on his feet. He resolves to fight to the end, and after defeating the monsters, his level increases. Mimori realizes that his skills are growing, and now he can cast spells not only on single enemies but over a wide area. The monsters start dying one after another, and Mimori gains more levels, gradually increasing his abilities. However, he begins to feel intense hunger and thirst. He decides to eat the monster's meat, but soon discovers that the pouch given to him contains food and water. After quenching his hunger and thirst, he continues killing monsters, steadily leveling up his skills. During his journey, he recalls the torment of his childhood, the abuse, and the moment when he was saved and taken into another family. As he progresses through the dungeon, Mimori finds the bodies of other fallen heroes who, like him, were sent here by the goddess to die. He finds a book left by one of the fallen heroes containing forbidden magic. The book speaks of a creature called the Soul Devourer, which destroys everything in its path. Soon, Mimori encounters this creature and discovers that he cannot use his skills against it. He realizes this is his final battle. The Soul Devourer does not attack Mimori directly, but instead summons monsters that resemble resurrected humans who had died earlier. On the verge of despair, Mimori realizes he cannot bring himself to use his skills against creatures that look like humans, even if they are already dead. This begins to drive him insane, but soon he understands that it is only a distraction from the real enemy. Using his wits, Mimori once again employs paralysis, stunning the Soul Devourer. He declares that he has outplayed the monster and finally destroys it. After his victory, the souls of the fallen in the dungeon begin to thank Mimori and ask him to avenge them against the goddess for their suffering. Mimori gaining the resolve to continue his journey despite all the hardships and to seek revenge for the injustice that he and the others have endured. The other students continue to gradually level up their skills by hunting monsters. One of the girls notices that they have been divided into groups, and although she is weaker, she asks to join a team. She approaches one of the students, hugs her around the chest, and asks her to finish off the monster they have caught. In that moment, she remembers Mimori, the very guy they thought was too weak to survive. Another girl who has also suffered at the hands of the goddess recalls Mimori as well. In a conversation with the goddess, she begins to realize that the goddess is simply getting rid of unnecessary people. The girl wants to protect the other students and suggests to the goddess that instead of banishing them, she will compensate for their lack of strength. The queen agrees to her proposal. Meanwhile, in the ruins, Memori continues to improve his skills. He notices slimes and discovers that he can apply various effects to them. He starts talking to one of the slimes, and in gratitude for being saved, it begins to follow him. Memori decides to read the forbidden book he found and learns that slimes can be made stronger. He comes up with a name for his new companion. At the same time, the girl decides to fight the guardians of the ruins, but they unexpectedly find Memori. They discuss among themselves that it's usually easier to deal with boys. They can just be killed, while with girls they can have some fun. Without hesitation, Memori uses paralysis on the monster and kills them with poison. The girl who is nearby senses that her hunters are dead, and soon Memori finds her. He paralyzes her to tell her that he killed her pursuers. The girl, surprised and alarmed, asks Memori if he really killed the 4 guards. After she learns the truth, she thanks Memori for saving her. He decides to let her go and she leaves, realizing that Memori is not as weak as everyone believed. Memori continuing on his journey, increasingly revealing his hidden powers and carving a path for himself in a world that once rejected him. Memori finds a town and requests permission to enter. He is allowed inside and decides to rent a room at an inn. He also realizes that he can gather a lot of useful information at the tavern. After reading the forbidden book, Memori learns about a dungeon he needs to clear and agrees to take on the quest. While registering at the guild, he notices a man harassing a girl, trying to uncover her identity. Later, on his way, Memori encounters this girl again. He warns her to be careful and asks for her help in the shop to avoid being deceived by the merchants. As a token of gratitude, he gives her some money. When the girl leaves, she suddenly loses her balance, and Memori helps her up. After this, Memori heads to the dungeon and notices that the monsters there are very weak. He also comes across the same man who had previously harassed the girl. Memori decides to take revenge, as the man clearly underestimated his strength. He uses paralysis and poison on his opponents. One of them begins to threaten Memori. Not realizing that he is already immobilized among, Memori leaves them to be eaten by the beasts. As he moves further into the dungeon, Memori decides to take a break. He notices other mercenaries who cannot understand how the monsters are dying. Eventually, Memori finds the treasure and kills its guardian. Later, he encounters the girl he had previously protected. He offers her the treasure since he doesn't need it, but she declines. However, after persistent requests, she decides that she should repay Memori in some way and offers to help him in battle. Memori agrees but sets a few conditions which the girl readily accepts. During their joint expedition, the girl tells him about the heroes and monsters they encountered earlier. Memori introduces her to his slime, which has already become his loyal companion. Seeing the girl's fatigue, Memori asks her to rest, and to help her relax, he uses his sleep spell on her. Memori continuing on his journey, developing his abilities and strengthening his connections with new allies. Memori and Sarah wake up and continue exploring the ruins. A very powerful monster appears in their path, and the girl asks Memori not to reveal the full extent of his abilities. However, Memori effortlessly kills the monster using several spells. After taking what he needs from the monster, they prepare to leave, but the slime informs him that he missed something. He finds an egg. Meanwhile, the other students are fighting regular monsters. Memori invites Sarah to his room for the evening and decides to hire her as a bodyguard. He calls her by her real name, Saras, and the girl reveals that she is an elf. Memori also discloses his real name. As a reward for her help, he gifts her a dragon gemstone. The girl refuses to accept such a valuable item, but Memori insists. Saras tells him that he doesn't know her past, but Memori responds that he doesn't care. In the evening, Saras decides to take a bath. Memori shares a secret with her related to the goddess. While the girl goes to collect her reward, Memori conducts experiments with his slime. Meanwhile, the queen heals one of the B-rank girls and asks Ayaka to join the class group, but she declines. The queen admits that she was ordered to get rid of all the students who cannot fight. Ayaka agrees to train the weaker students to save them. Memori awaits Saras's return, but she seems to have gotten into trouble. He notices dragons soaring above the forest and soon learns that Saras is trying to escape from knights who have been ordered to kill her. One of the knights says they want to rape her first. However, Memori arrives just in time to save Saras. The girl, shaken by the events, decides to terminate their agreement, feeling indebted for Memori's rescue, but Memori tells her that he doesn't want to search for a new bodyguard and asks her to take off her clothes, likely hinting at a plan for further action. Memori tells the girl to change, expressing concern for her, and notes that she reminds him of his aunt. Trying to uncover the truth from a guard, Memori witnesses the guard being killed by another guard. Soon he notices that a very powerful man, the Emperor, is on the dragon who has ordered the girl's execution. The Emperor challenges her to fight him, but Mimori decides not to speak directly with the guards. One of the strong knights remarks that the boy does not fear him at all. Mimori asks him about the princess, and the knight explains that the students summoned by the princess learn very quickly. Mimori proposes a duel with the knight, who claims to be a hero that the princess has sent once before. He reveals his desire to gain power that will help him overthrow the goddess. One of the strongest heroes states that he will wait for Mimori to grow stronger so he can overthrow the goddess, adding that the girl they are trying to kill is merely a tool for that purpose. Mimori uses his paralysis skill and poisons the strongest ones with venom. Despite their attempt to attack him after being paralyzed, they are unsuccessful. One of the heroes asks to kill Mimori before they die. Strengthening his slime, Mimori applies his skills to everyone present using paralysis and blindness. The girl states that she will not let him die and will do everything possible to protect him. Meanwhile, the queen sends Nanshan to train the students, and she easily immobilizes one of them. The girl thanks Mimori for saving her and promises to assist him in any way, becoming his reliable ally. The guards are discussing the recently discovered ruins from which no one has survived. Mimori buys a mask to conceal his face, and soon the king is informed that someone has defeated 5 dragons. The queen is present at the meeting. They pass by the Colosseum where slaves are fighting, and Sarah suggests that Mimori rent a room for 2 to save money. Later, at the tavern, Mimori learns that someone has taken responsibility for the deaths of the guards. He sits down with other patrons to find out about the strongest fighter in the Colosseum. At that moment, a girl enters the tavern, and Mimori asks her about the witch she wanted to meet. She warns him that he looks weak and advises him to be cautious. Returning to his room, Mimori takes out food from another world using his magical pouch. He contemplates how to free his mercenary. Mimori asks Saras to teach him some basic combat techniques. While washing his clothes, Saras can't help herself and decides to smell them. She then offers him sleeping herbs but mistakenly gives him arousing herbs instead. When Mimori cannot fall asleep, Saras asks him why he isn't interested in other girls. He replies that his mind is currently occupied with revenge. The next day, Saras tells him about a strong slave named Eve Speed, who defeats everyone in the Colosseum fights. Eve will have her final battle, and she is fighting to free a girl from slavery. Mimori takes Eve aside for a conversation and tells her that the Duke is planning her death for the next day. He offers her a chance to escape, but Eve refuses, deciding to fight until the end. Mimori also suggests they escape together, revealing that he is the one who defeated the 5 guards. Despite having some trust in him, Eve still declines his help. Mimori says he will leave the city in the morning and will wait for her on the bridge if she changes her mind. Later, Eve overhears a conversation between the king and learns that she is to be poisoned and that the dark elf girl is to be sold. This prompts Eve to come to the bridge, where Mimori agrees to help her. In the tavern, the girl is being bullied, and Eve takes her away, asking her to lie to the Duke. Mimori decides to deal with the tavern owner for the bullying by staging a robbery. The girl, named Elizabeth, introduces herself to Mimori, who reveals his true name in return. They all escape from the city together. As Eve begins to trust Mimori, she asks him why he needs a witch. He explains that he needs the witch to read important records. As they climb the mountain, they are pursued. Eve decides to stay and fight, asking Mimori to take care of the girl. However, Mimori replies that he is ready for battle. Using traps, he divides the pursuers, preparing to confront them. The head of the mages, Ashinta, demands that Mimori and his companions come out of the forest and reveals their plan. Ashinta states that their archers have poison on their arrows and that they presented themselves as assassins, deceiving others since there is no evidence of their crimes. One of the girls tries to shift the blame for the guard's murder onto Eve, but she is not believed. Mimori remains unnoticed, using tactics to make the enemies think they are in a favorable position. When the second squad arrives, Mimori cannot use his abilities through the slime a second time and asks Eve for help. He also realizes that his abilities can affect up to 80 targets simultaneously. Meanwhile, the Duke begins to lose his mind and Eve continues to fight, killing enemies one by one. Eventually, they kill the Duke. Mimori decides to get rid of the mages by freezing their bodies and then shattering them into pieces. Saki comforts the little girl, asking her to forget the terrible words she had been told earlier. She also offers Mimori to lie on her lap, showing her trust and care. Mimori explains that he helps Liz and Eve because they share a similar past with him. He promises to fulfill any wish Liz has as a token of gratitude. Meanwhile, the student Ayaka continues to train secretly, showing her determination to become stronger. Toka gifts Lise a dress, and they decide to name their group the Flymasters. When they stand on the edge of a cliff, Eve demonstrates her new skill. Mimori's thirst for power does not wane. He realizes he cannot catch up with S-rank heroes, but he can narrow the level gap. Meanwhile, the queen orders the best warriors to train the heroes and plans to send them to lands populated by golden-eyed monsters, which creates new challenges for the heroes. Mimori continues to explore strong monsters and concludes that the creatures in the ruins he defeated earlier were much stronger. He asks the others not to worry too much about Lise, as she needs to become more independent. During their journey, the princess slips and falls into the water, but Mimori gives her his cloak, showing care. Meanwhile, Eve notices a strong monster, but to Mimori they seem weak and he easily defeats them. Mimori notices that the egg he has been carrying in his backpack is about to hatch. A magical horse emerges from it. Mimori decides to transfer some of his mana to this creature, and the horse quickly grows to maturity. At the same time, the hero Kirihara is annoyed that he has to share his experience with weaker students. That night, a powerful monster attacks the group, and Kirihara demonstrates his skills to showcase his superiority. However, Mimori notices a flash in the forest, which puts him on alert. Then everyone decides to go to sleep, but Mimori realizes that Eve and Saki fully trust him. During their conversation, they suddenly notice a monster, and after it is killed, it provokes all the other creatures in the area to start attacking them. This becomes a new threat for the group, but Mimori is ready for new battles. Ive decides to distract the monsters, but Mimori is categorically against this plan. He intends to fight them alone despite the enormous threat. The monsters begin to pass by the other students. They move towards Mimori, who is ready to engage in battle on his magical beast. At the same time, student Ayaka accuses one of her classmates of the deaths of 2 students. He, in turn, claims that the strong should protect the weak, but he is accused of arrogance. As a result, a conflict arises, and a higher-ranked student comes to the girl's defense, while Tomohiro argues that the ranking system is meaningless and does not determine true strength. Feeling exhausted due to a lack of sleep, Mimori finds himself in a weakened state. Understanding this, Eva decides to help him. Mimori activates his slime and uses the Berserker skill, causing the monsters to start fighting each other. Despite this, his mana gradually decreases to 0, and he realizes that he must continue to fight even in this state. He turns around to level up and easily defeats 2 powerful monsters. When other enemies surround him, Mimori, thanks to the level increase, continues to hold his ground in battle, using his enhanced abilities. Meanwhile, Iva encounters other heroes, and one of them suddenly attacks her, adding new complications to their situation. One of the teachers stops her attacks. While saving Eve from the ambush, she says that he is looking for his leader. Meanwhile, Mimori continues his battle, but his slime has exhausted all its energy. He keeps fighting, gaining over 2,000 levels. He notices that there is still one very strong opponent left. The opponent knocks Mimori off his horse, but the guy easily kills him by tricking him with a mask. After defeating the monster, he unlocks an advanced skill. Almost out of breath, he is saved by Eve. She tells him that she met some girls who are heroes along the way. They decide to take a break, and Saki helps the guy, offering to lay his head on her lap. The girl says that she is very worried about him and expresses her loyalty. Saki notices that the guy has already fallen asleep and decides to touch him, accidentally almost kissing him but ultimately deciding to kiss him. Saki apologizes to him. She wants to confess her love to Mimori but decides to postpone it for now. However, Mimori has already noticed everything. They observe the heart of the witch's domain, and behind a magical door they find the witch. The witch introduces herself to them.